how many dead bodies are you finding in your county?
There's some years that we hit 120, some years we hit 100, so it varies, right? But on the average, it's about 60 to 65.
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
In this episode, we continue our journey along the southern border with Sheriff Jenny Martinez of Brooks County, Texas. Now, Brooks County is not directly on the border with Mexico, but it still faces the same problems that border counties face. You may remember our 2014 documentary, Border States of America. The reason we chose that title is because even states that are not directly on the border have been forced to deal with the illegal immigration problem, making every state a border state. In Brooks County, Texas, these problems are happening literally in people's backyards. Jenny Martinez, thank you so much for opening up your office and your conference room and having us come in to record our podcast with you. So you are the sheriff of Brooks County, and how long have you been sheriff?
I guess I'm going to come into my third term now.
Your third term? So when are you up for re-election again?
March of 2024.
Okay, so same as presidential years.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and your county is not right on the border, correct?
That's correct.
You're about how far north of the border?
About 70 miles north of the border.
And yet, 70 miles north of the border, you still encounter issues with illegal immigration and the flow of migrants into our country.
That's correct.
What kind of issues do you experience?
Well, like currently, as we're speaking here, we're having run-throughs, and that means they're not walking at this point. They're not walking. They're driving them through private ranches, and they're actually just cutting the locks or cutting the fences and driving through. And sometimes they'll drive through almost 50, 60 miles. So it depends on what direction and who's actually the core of the people that's doing it. Depends on what they have, how quick they want to exit the ranch lands. So that's what's occurring now.
And when they're driving through ranch land like that, are they driving on roads or are they just driving like in the middle of the property?
It varies. Sometimes they're driving on just property itself, or they're driving on gravel roads that are out there. You know, back in the day we had a lot of drilling going on, and so you still have those old roads out there.
And what kind of impact does that have for the ranchers?
Well, the fact is that most of these ranchers have cattle on the property. So when they cut those fences, not so much the interior fences, but when they cut the fences off the major highway, which is 281, that's when it becomes a problem. You'll have a lot of livestock out on the highway, and that could be deadly for those traveling through Brooks County on the way up north.
And it is harmful economically for the ranchers as well.
Well, there's always a cost to that, and repairing the gates, repairing the fences. Just 2 days ago, we had a fence that at a cost of $70,000 that they busted through. And then another one for $20,000. So the cost just keeps going up. And
then in this county, I know that you previously had 2 mobile morgues, and you were telling me a few minutes ago that you now, instead of getting a third mobile morgue, you have a permanent morgue here.
The county does have a permanent morgue here, yes.
Why was that necessary?
It just had to be. It's just the fact that the bodies were picking up, the bodies we were recovering out in the ranch land, so we had to get another one. And then what happened is that Zavala County, a county 2.5 hours northwest of here, they were having the same type of crisis. So they bring their bodies into our morgue, and just to help them on the cost. There's always a cost with that.
So elaborate on that a little bit, because there are going to be people who are listening who are unfamiliar with what's happening and how you wind up with people who have died that you have to pick up.
Well, these are actually immigrants that are walking through the brushlands, and they quite don't make it. They get injured, they get hurt, they get left behind, etc. So they just perish out in the ranch lands. Yeah, this is what we come across. So in recovering those bodies, of course, we have to do the DNA process, and this is why the morgue was needed, so we can store them and get them identified. You know, we work real closely with the United States Border Patrol, the Migrant Missing Program, and they'll come in there with our group, their group and our officers, and they'll fingerprint those hands that can be fingerprinted. At times, there's nothing to fingerprint. So we rely on either dental, we rely on if they still have skin on them, on the tattoos. So something that's solid, something that we can filter back to the respective consulates. And actually all the consulates get the same picture because we really don't know where they're from. So they're the ones that will decipher as to what country they might be from.
Wow. And how many dead bodies are you finding in your county? A month, a year?
Well, we've been on the average since 2009. We're around 60, 65 a year on the average since 2009. There's some years that we hit 120, some years we hit 100, so it varies, 60. So it varies, right? But on the average, it's about 60 to 65.
And these are bodies that are found on the ranch land. That means it's people's. It's like maybe not quite a backyard, but if you had a farm, it's on your farmland, right? This is where many. It's not like you're. Maybe you are. It's not just on the side of the road or in public spaces.
No, these are private ranch lands, and these are, I do call them backyards, since some of them have 50,000 acre backyards. Okay, so that's what I do call them. They're pastures out there, you know, they got livestock on them, they have game, wildlife, etc. So yes, this is where they come to rest. Their last moment, the last breath is taken in private ranch lands here.
I can't even imagine what that would be like for the homeowner and the rancher to find that on their property. And I would imagine if you have an average of 60 a year, there are some ranchers who this is happening more than once a year for them.
Well, absolutely. And you know, it's not something you get used to, neither, because every single body is different. In terms of sometimes what I refer to as a full body, everything's still intact. Eyeballs, ears, fingers, limbs, all that. Some of them are missing that because the feral hog or the animals, the wild animals, start picking on it and eating on it, and so parts disappear, right? So it varies on what we go out and collect and recover.
What are things that you think would make this situation better? And was it better under the previous administration? Did things get better under President Trump than they had been under President Biden and President Obama? And we could go back to George W. Bush as well, but you were, I don't know if you were in office at that point.
I was not, but it was better on the previous administration simply because I could see the decrease, right? But now that when this new administration came in, their policies started changing. So that pretty much put out a message out there that you can go ahead and come on in. It kind of opened it up a little bit more, and those were their thoughts, and they were just on it or taking advantage of that, and that's what happens. So the policies really have hurt this particular issue. So it's very difficult to deal with it when policies are not there and there's no consequences behind those policies.
And what do you think would make the situation better?
Just secure the border, period. Just secure it.
How would you go about doing that?
Well, you just shut it down completely. And then everyone, we're not saying don't come. All I'm saying is secure it completely, anything in between the port of entries, and then you come as you should, and with proper documents and everything else, just like we would if we were to travel abroad. So things like that, of that nature, it would definitely help us, help the whole U.S. for that matter.
Right. And if they were going through an airport, they would have to have proper documentation, right? Like if you're going through customs and you flew somehow into the country, before you even leave the other country, you've got to have your documentation to leave the country, and then to get into the United States, you have to have documentation to get into the United States. But on the border, we're not requiring the same standards that we require in the airports.
Not at all. You pretty much, they're just coming just at random, and some of them are getting their little one app or whatever is it that they call it, and they're released into the U.S. pending a callback for a hearing, and that might take 36, 48 months. It all depends on the process.
When you are encountering people here in your county right now in 2023, what countries are they from?
It varies. I mean, you pretty much name it, they're here. Of course, the Triangle County countries, and then various other countries. So it just depends how or what we meet out there in the brush and how they're coming across.
So are you meeting people from China, from Iran, I think that another sheriff told me they're considered special interest countries?
We have those, yes, we have. And again, it all varies as to how, if we make contact with them or not.
Okay.
If we can get our hands on them, yes. If Border Patrol usually handles those if they're from those type of countries. So yes, but they are coming through.
Okay. And then you're doing this interview and you care about border security, and yet you are not a Republican, are you? Are you a Democrat or are you a Republican?
I'm a Democrat.
And so for you, this is a nonpartisan issue, right? It is an issue that you care about because you see the consequences of an insecure border every day.
Absolutely. You know, there's three issues that I deal with 70 miles north of the border. It is the national security issue, a public health issue, and a humanitarian issue. Those are the issues I deal with, all three of them, all three components.
And what do you think about other places across the country? Do you think that sanctuary cities and states are a magnet to pull people across the southern border? And then when we met earlier today, you had a delegation here from Iowa, from the state legislature in Iowa, and they recently passed laws I don't know exactly what the law was, but they have passed some laws to crack down on human trafficking. Do you think that those kind of laws would help deter some of what we're seeing?
Well, just like our governor, Governor Abbott, he imposes some laws that I think will help us to deter, right? Because you also have to have consequences behind those. You have to prosecute those type of cases. So it depends on the smuggler, I should say, and how they want to get them across, and they're willing to take that risk. Okay, so yes, the laws are there, so we can enforce the laws. It's just like a tool that we can utilize to better, put our hands around it, put our arms around it. So it's just one of those things that we have to deal with on a daily basis here, but it does help us on this issue of the trafficking and the smuggling and anything else that goes with it.
Okay, and then are there specific laws that you would like to see passed either in Congress or in Texas that would help make your job better here?
I think what we just currently went through there's strong bills that helps all
right.
Law enforcement in Texas to stand behind and enforce it. Of course, we have to have the prosecution with it too, so that also would enhance it. It definitely will deter the issue, but then again, like I mentioned earlier, it depends on the will of those that are coming across, of those that are pushing them to come across, the smuggler. So it's one of those challenges that we deal with.
Okay, and then let's shift gears just a little bit. So you are part of is it the Southwest Border Sheriff Association, or what is did I get the name right?
No, you're right. We're part of the Texas Border Sheriff's Coalition as
Okay.
well as the Southwest Border Sheriff's Coalition. yes.
And what does that coalition do, and why is it important?
It's important because we all deal with the same issues along the corridor, whether it's the Southwest Corridor, which we run from Brownsville all the way up to El Paso, across to New Mexico, Arizona, up to San Diego, California. So all those counties along that corridor just has the same issues, the same concerns. And as a coalition, we just sit down and we try to get with our representatives that we can reach out to and listen to us and tell us what we need in order to kind of meet the demand of the influx that comes in, right? Whether it's resources, whether it's new laws, whatever whatever we can get our hands on to just utilize it as a tool to minimize the damage that's being created, to minimize the pursuits, the deaths, etc.
And have you been successful in getting legislation passed as a coalition at all? I know that in Washington, D.C., that hasn't happened because the immigration law largely hasn't changed, at least not going through the proper legislative process for years in Washington. But at a state level, have you been influential as this coalition?
Yes, in the state level we have. Of course, it's just because the governor has pretty much lent a good ear and is listening to our concerns, and not only us though, the landowners that are out there, they're getting hit hard every single day. So he understands it. He understands as well as the Senate and our representatives. We do have some bipartisan law that came into place to help us combat this issue, because not only do you have your trafficking, but you also have those that are mistreated once they get here and don't have the same comfort as everyone else. So there's a lot of little issues that apply here that we need to look at, instead of just the fact that we're picking on people that shouldn't be coming across.
And when they come across, at this point, they move through your county, and most of them are moving through on vehicles. So, correct? Or are there not as many who are moving through on foot?
Currently, they're moving on within vehicles. Yes. And
then they leave your county, so they're pretty quickly getting onto the interstate system to go to other parts of the country. Correct?
That is correct.
What do you have interaction with other sheriffs around the country outside of the Border Sheriff Coalition? And what do they say as they see the problems and move out of the border region, the southern border region, and into the rest of the country?
Well, being part of the National Sheriff's Association, you have sheriffs out of Idaho, sheriffs out of Oklahoma, sheriffs out of Maryland, New York. You pretty much name the state and they'll have the same issues we have here, but at a different level, because they're already there, they're vetted. A lot of it is just the infrastructure that can't sustain it because of the amount of people coming in. But is the issue there? Absolutely. And it all starts down here in the south end, about 70 miles south of us. So it really impacts all of us. Colorado, so it just, kind of name the state, it does have the challenges.
And one of the things that we keep trying to convey, and we've been doing this since we created the documentary back in 2014, going through and explaining the problem with the open border, is that every state really winds up being a border state. That's why we call it Border States of America, because you face a problem right here and you're in the front line of the problem, but once they're on the interstate system or get on airplanes, they move to other parts of the country, and it has an impact on the rest of the country. If they're moving through and getting asylum or being assigned a court date, and I think that the way that is being handled it is outside the law. And if it is outside what the written law is, that's a problem. But the people who are turning themselves in, they are not hardened criminals. normally. But they have an impact on the schools, they have an impact on the hospitals, they have an impact on the infrastructure, as you mentioned. And then you've got the people who you deal with as they're moving through your county. Those are people who are probably much more hardened criminals, and they're not moving through your county rapidly. I'm sure they're up to no good.
Well, we have come across a lot of different type of, we come across MS-13s as it filtered through back in, whether they're backpacking narcotics or they're pushing a group of people. And you're right, you have a lot of, I guess you can mention females that are filtering through also, that they get violated as they travel through. So the impact is a lot larger than just the infrastructure, as you mentioned. Around here, we don't have no type of hospital. We don't have a hospital, period. So our quickest response here is traveling 30, 40 minutes to the local hospital if there's the need, okay? So we rely a lot on Border Patrol for assistance, as well as the state police. So we kind of like grow together in this. And we filtered through it, and it happened. We just had a meeting this morning with all the stakeholders and talking about the run-throughs, and we know it's going to happen. We're just trying to kind of get some type of momentum to figure out how to really not so much shut it down, because you're never going to shut it down, but just kind of minimize the damage that they're doing, because there is damage, and there is a lot of issues that comes with it. The public health issue, not knowing what they're carrying with them as they're traveling through, neither. The national security issues, the wanted persons that are coming through. So a lot of this, and those that get left behind. I came across a young lady, I would say about maybe 36 months ago. She gave birth to her baby in the bucket of a backhoe, okay? As soon as she gave birth, we were there, she wants to know which way is Houston. So I said, well, you're not going to Houston, you're going to the hospital with the ambulance. So, and I don't know what happened after that. But that's their mindset, just trying to get to Houston. And of course, from there, either they're kept there or they're shipped out elsewhere. They continue the journey.
And when they continue the journey like that, are they free at that point, or do they still have an obligation to ever help them across the border?
Well, it all depends. If to me, there's still an obligation, simply because we've gotten calls on family members saying that, well, someone is holding my son or my daughter because they want more money. Okay, so there's always an obligation. It's just not a free pass in terms of, okay, pay me X amount of dollars and then you're free to go. No, there's something more behind that once they have control of you. So that's what they face too. That's another challenge that they go through. And people need to understand that when they're sending either young boys or young girls or adults, they need to understand that there is other consequences within that group, within that organized crime, that's the criminal that's bringing them through. There's always something behind it. It's just not, okay, you're done, you can go away now. No, they're going to hold them until they get more monies.
And I think that one of the things that's so disturbing about that is that it seems to me it winds up being, they become indentured servants here. They come here and they're working, and it's not working the land the way that maybe we learned about it when we were in elementary school or middle school, but they're working, and they have to pay money back to whoever helped them get across the border, and whoever helped them get across the border is likely a cartel.
Well, and it seems like the normal person doesn't think of that. They're just thinking of the fact that we'll let them come through. No, there's a lot behind that, and this is why we need to secure the border and let them come through the way everyone should be coming through, where they're treated as normal persons, like human beings, and not stuff in the trunk of a car or on top of a reefer or inside the reefer or truck tractor, whatever the case might be, because it's going to be a bad scene for them.
Right. And I just become so horrified by what is happening to the people. People in America think it is humane and that they are being compassionate by allowing the borders to just be completely open. And they don't understand that because of the way that this is happening, first, it's outside the law. So I have a real problem when the law is not upheld. Either we are a country of laws or we're a country of men. And when it's men, that's the kind of country these people are escaping. They're escaping lawless countries, and they're turning America into what they're trying to escape from. But then the other thing is, I think that there are many people who don't understand the impact and the implication, like what you're talking about. They owe the cartel.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're coming across, and I was with Border Patrol earlier today, and they said that oftentimes the parents will come across and then their children come across afterwards, and their children are coming across alone, 6 and 7 years old, just given to strangers to come across. That's very troubling to me.
I get a little, I guess, notes from local Border Patrol, and I think 18% are unaccompanied minors, 18%. All right, so that's a lot, for a parent or anyone to let their child come across by themselves. A lot of times they're used as a shield or used as a cover to where they're responsible for the child, or the sponsor is already in the United States waiting for him to arrive, whatever the case might be. But you just kind of let unoccupied minors come across like that. Can't see it neither, because I've had children myself, and I wouldn't want to do that to them. So there's a lot in this that goes beyond sight, right? That's kind of like hidden, that no one talks about, and we really need to wake up to this issue, and treat it as such, and get those criminals and arrest them and prosecute them, and secure the border,
right.
Because it's not about having an open border. It's just the rule of law. It's there. I think every officer took an oath, and that is to defend the Constitution of their respective, of the United States and of the respective state. So that's what I follow. And it's pretty simple. There's nothing to it. It's just doing it. Do your part, and then everyone else will do theirs, because that's what the laws are there for.
And as a sheriff, that is what your role as a sheriff is to help uphold the law. And that is the role of sheriffs and your deputies across the entire country, correct?
Absolutely. And I think that's what we all believe in, but sometimes it's very discouraging when you actually have to kind of battle the administration, in this case, and for them to understand what they really have created. And it's not good, just because of the impact that's occurring. You just can't put a number in terms of monies to prospective issues, and they're going to go away. It's not like that.
Now, you said you have 3 different aspects. You mentioned the public health aspect
Mm-hmm.
and national security. Mm-hmm. What are the kind of issues that you experience with public health?
Public health, like during the time of COVID, when it was out, 20% of the bodies we recovered were positive for COVID. Okay, and then there's other issues, underlying issues that we don't even know about, that they might be carrying, because there's no contact made with them. What you refer to the getaways around, what are they carrying with them? All right, that's what I'm talking about. Because they're just like us, there's not every country deals with the health issues they have promptly like we do. They're different, even though they get a lot of funding from the United States, but there's no accountability on what they do with the particular funding.
And then what kind of national security issues?
Well, the MS-13 is definitely a security issue. The countries you mentioned prior is definitely a security issue. So those are the issues we deal with, because it is a cartel, and they're well organized, they're well greased, and they can move things quickly, and they can adapt and kind of reorganize and go a different route. You stop the water leak on the left side, they're going to open it up on the right side, and vice versa. They have means to communicate and get things done a lot quicker, really, than us, simply because their way of communicating is easier, in terms of, if you don't do what I tell you, I'll just get someone else to do it, and they won't find you again. right? When we have to follow the rule of law, we have to follow what's in place. Dot our I's and cross our T's. They don't need to do that.
Well, and if they don't see you again, it's not just following the rule of law, but it's actually respecting human life as well and not making people disappear.
Exactly, and that's what they'll do. It's that easy for them.
Elaborate on, it's MS-13, elaborate on that. I would imagine that there are some people who might be listening to this who they don't even understand what that is, and maybe they think that cartels being in charge of the border or being involved with the border on the southern side is a myth.
No, it's not. Even the MS-13, they're already vetted pretty much in the United States. They are a very volatile gang that, as the cartels, they just take care of business. They in terms of just putting you away for a while. So that's what they do. And it's very critical for us to understand that. It's critical for us to kind of like, in terms of this administration, making sure that all federal entities take their gloves off and go to work and go after these people. They know, I'm sure we know where they're at. It's just a matter of, executing what the law says, executing the law. That's it. There are violations.
And what are the kind of violations that we're experiencing?
You pretty much name it. It would be homicide, it would be rape, it would be just holding you hostage for whatever reason, for extra money, extortion, whatever. They do it. Stolen vehicles, you just name it. They're right behind it. Because it's all about funding, it's all about monies for them.
And when you say cartels and you mention MS-13, what other entities are involved with cartels?
Well, that spreads a lot. It spreads because you have your locals also that will become part of that. You have other gang members that want to be part of that, so they're going to make every effort to get themselves noticed and then do something they shouldn't do. And now they're in. There's no way to turn back on what they just done. So that's how they recruit. That's how they retain through force, through enforcement. The way they do it, not so much our enforcement, but the way they do their own enforcement.
What is a typical day like for you and for your deputies?
And that's every day is different, so it varies. We either going out and handling fences, or picking up recovering bodies, or we're just doing local issues, local crime that we also have to deal with. That doesn't go away because you're dealing with other things. So it just varies on any given day. And I think that's what I always liked about law enforcement. Every day is different. Every day brings you a new challenge. But challenges are good because you learn from them.
What are some of the challenges that you've had and lessons you've learned?
And actually, just doing this in terms of the dead bodies, because working for the state police, you deal with different issues. Working for the county, you deal with everything, all the above. And this has been one of the biggest challenges in terms of recovering the bodies, getting them identified, working with the consulates, working with NAMAs, those components that makes it makes everyone get identified, creates the identification path, working with universities. So it really has opened up a lot more, avenues, but with more challenges, with more longer tail, should I say, to make things happen at the end of the day, get them correct.
I think that what you're doing, I think that the fact that you have 60 on average dead bodies a week, that's over one a week that on average you're dealing with, and it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. And it seems to me that you're trying your best to find a way to deal with a very tragic situation in a humane and respectful manner so that they hopefully can be identified, sent back to the country where they were from, and be treated in a way that if you were found in that situation you would want to be treated?
Well, I've always believed, if you believe in the rule of law, you believe that once you're on U.S. soil, it's due process. And with that comes everything else with it, because we all know what happens when you're out there alone, and it's a slow death. Okay, it's coming. It's not like we just get hit by a car and that's it. This is slow. You're dying. So it's one of those things that you just want to go and kind of clean it up, sort of, and make sure, put everyone at ease, and kind of give them that proper caring that they need, because they're found out there by themselves. There's a lot of, you find missing limbs. You have it's just not a good-looking body when you get out there, if there's a body.
Well, it's 105 degrees here today, and this isn't the hottest day. I mean, it probably does not take very long after they've died to have decomposition set in a rather brutal manner.
Absolutely, and they know it. Okay, and this is why it's important. We have over 200-300 placards out there that the Border Patrol have put out there, that in different areas where they feel they can see them and call it in if they need to help. We have beacons also. They just turn the beacon on and they stay put, they go get help. So it's there. Most of the agents are trained to apply the IV, etc. So it's also there. So there's been a lot put forth to help them if they call us for a rescue. And it happens, right? It happens. But then again, if we miss that one person, it's got to be done in a timely manner to get there, providing that someone calls us in a timely manner. I've had instances where a young lady got hit just half a mile south of the checkpoint itself. And it took 4 days later to call us, because the guide got all the way to the respective state. And then the family members had to fly into Texas to tell us about the body, where they could have just as easily notified us when they first got hit. So things like that is very frustrating, because we could have done something about it quicker versus, 4 or 5 days later, almost a week. And we go through that. Why? Because they're scared. They're scared to call. They're told not to call. And if they get lost or they need help, they'll tell them, you got to wait an hour or two before you reach out for some type of assistance so we can get away. Things like that that no one really knows that it's happening, but it does happen. It's a sad thing, because it's a slow death.
What's terrible about the situation that you just described is that the people who are helping these people get across the border, first, they're enabling them to get across. I don't think it's helpful. They have, it seems to me, they have no regard for human life. It's more of a product or a commodity, and they're doing a job. And if they called you, regardless of the circumstances, whether they are here legally or not, and regardless of all of that, you're still going to offer them the care that they need if they're in distress.
Absolutely. And that's the right thing to do. It
is the right thing to do. And yet the people who are helping them, and I use that in air quotes for people who are listening and don't see my hand gestures, they're not really helping, and they just care about themselves. They don't care about the people who they claim to be helping at all.
Yes, because and that's a proven fact, because every time when we go out there and we rescue someone, we ask what happened. Well, I got sick. Maybe I didn't drink the right water, or whatever the case might be. Maybe because that, or I got injured, sprained my ankle, my knee, and I got left behind. They didn't wait for me. Or I woke up and there was no one around. They're gone. So that's what happens. And this is where this particular person gets turned around, because they don't know which way to go. The only one that knows is going to be the guide. And that's, I can just imagine someone out there in this heat, right, and not knowing which way to go, because everybody don't know which way is north. or east or west for that matter, and they go in circles.
And I've seen enough of the land out here. If you're not right next to a road, you could be out in a field in the brush. You may not even be that far away at all from a road, but you just don't, if you get turned around, you could be going in circles. And help could be fairly nearby, but you're just stuck in the middle of the wilderness.
Well, and it's quite true, because, correct statement, we picked up a body that was just along the fence line, probably maybe 6 feet from the major highway. That's where he died. That's how he could go. He couldn't go anymore. So, of course, the grass was high and they couldn't see him, right? But we found him because a rancher saw him, so we went over there, and I mean, he was that close. Probably not the length of the table. That's how close he was to the main roadway. If he would have just crawled out, someone would have seen him, and he would have been rescued. But that's how close they get. They just don't know where they're at.
Right. You mentioned how many dead bodies, and you've mentioned rescues. How many rescues do you do a year?
Oh, there's plenty of them. 400, maybe more.
Wow.
But yeah, again, it's rescues because they actually call us early enough before they get to that stage where they just can't talk. And sometimes we let them know, okay, go ahead and turn your phone off and then call us again later when you get to a certain point that we think you ought to be, or stay where you're at, turn the phone off, and then call us again to make sure someone gets there to you. Because it's their phone, it just runs out like anything else. It runs out of battery unless there's no charger out there. So this is why the placards are there. If they were to just get to a placard or a beacon and call it in, signal the beacon, call it in, and stay there, we'll find them, as long as they don't move. Because that's why they're there. Each thing is numbered, and we know exactly where it is.
So your constituents are the voters here in Brooks County. What are the kind of things you hear from them about the situation?
Well, they understand it, and they understand that what's happening is just a humanitarian type of issue, right? Because we've been around here. I was born and raised here, so I've seen this even back at the age of 10. But back then it was different. You only get 1 or 2 persons going through versus 20 or 30 at the same time. Right. So the number has increased. The makeup of the person has changed. Their demands are different. Okay, so there's just the whole makeup of it has turned around on us,
and
to where no one feels safe. No one feels safe no more. We have a lot of ranchers that have moved out. A lot of families have moved out. Just simply because we just can't get there in time. Okay, and instead of them just taking a chance of defending themselves and just getting to the point where they might have to, hurt someone real bad, they just move out. So that's what they go through. That's what they've been going through. So that's why a lot of people have moved out of their respective ranches.
And are they selling the ranches, or what happens to the ranches at that point?
They still keep the ranch, but
okay.
they all come in numbers now back to the ranch, to where they can get enough help and things are settled, to where they don't have to worry about it, because you have other people there that can handle situations, right? And maybe even speak the language and help them just move on. Because no one really wants to do anything bad to them. It's just the fact that they get scared because they just kind of pop out of nowhere. That here I am, I need this, and the other. So that makes it real difficult for them too, because they're away from city, from the closest city. So it makes it hard.
You said that the demands of the people who are coming across the border and the makeup of those people are different than when you were younger, when you were a child. What is the difference? Well,
the demand is the fact that they either, if your car is there and if they have keys in the car, they're going to take it. If they need, they're going to try to force themselves into the house to either use your phone if they need a phone, or whatever else they might need. There's no respect anymore like it used to be back when I was growing up. they were they were polite. They just need water, they need a little sandwich or something, get it, and they keep going. Nowadays, you don't do that. Now you have, like I said, either 5, 10, 15 or more people that show up, and, it's difficult, right? Because you don't know what's with them. You don't know what they're carrying. And if you see a group, you don't really know who the main person is and how volatile he can get, right? So you have to be cognizant of that and be aware of those surroundings. And that's what makes it, difficult.
What motivates you to keep doing this? Why are you going to run for re-election and continue doing this?
I think, in law enforcement, it's more of a calling. It's not so much to have a large income, because it's not about that. It's just a calling. And I guess I just been around it for so long, 43 going on 44 years. So it's just one of those things that I want to continue to do until I feel like, okay, I can't help anymore. I'm done, right? So, and there's moments like that, don't get me wrong, just because of the way things are now. But I'm still, I can still do it. I can still move around, and I still enjoy it. Again, every day, like I mentioned, every day is different. The challenges are different, and I like that because it just kind of keeps you moving, keeps you thinking, and everything that comes with it. Because you also have your good side too. To being a sheriff, you meet a lot of great people, and you see a lot of kids grow up in the community and go on to better themselves and get a solid education. So that's good. That's what you want. That's what you. That's why you invest back in the community. They're the ones that got me here, so I'm just investing back, giving back to them.
That's very good. And you've been involved in law enforcement for 43 years. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
What was your first position?
I was a highway patrolman for the state police.
How long did you do that?
Oh, maybe 12, I think. And then after that, I got into the world of narcotics. Back then, that's what they used to call it, and we did good work. I enjoyed it,
And you're still dealing with narcotics today, just in a different manner now, correct?
Yes, different manner. Now you have someone else to do it, right? But no, it's really good. I enjoy it. I really do. It's almost the same method, but you have different people now, different players playing it. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys are a little bit more serious than what used to be back in the 90s, right? Because you were lacking that mutual respect. Okay, and I guess that's fair to say, because now it's more, they're going to challenge you.
Right.
Well, before they didn't. Before they're like, okay, here I am. Now it's different.
What would you tell the average American citizen? What would you want them to know about the situation that you face? If they're listening to this, what are the important points you'd want to say to them? And then I'm going to ask you, what would you say to Washington, D.C.?
I think I would say to Washington, D.C. is let the federal government work. Let them do what they're supposed to do. Quit applying policies that is not going to help us at all, or help the federal agencies to work. I think DEA does a great job. So is ICE and DHS. They all want to work, and it's very discouraging to them when they can't work. Right? Who wouldn't be discouraged, right?
Right.
It hurts the morale, as I say. What I would say to the public is just, hey, this is happening. We really need, and the fact is, we really need different policies to secure this border. We just can't make it a safe passageway in terms of how they see it as. Just come over and you'll be okay, that type. I think we need to follow the rule of law. I think that's important. I think that we need to kind of like start being aware of our surroundings as to how things are developing and how society is changing. We need to understand that. And we need to be careful with it, that it doesn't get too far out there on the left side to where we're not going to be able to bring it to the middle and be, safe and kind of feel comfortable with what's occurring, and not just one-sided. It's because it can get very difficult, very, very complex, and I think we all understand that. We all understand how complex this issue is. We get it. We really do. Law enforcement does. But we're following the rule of law. We're following what the laws are there. Okay? So I think everyone is to be aware of that.
Okay, and then one last thing I want to hit on. You mentioned how Border Patrol, Customs, ICE, DEA, they want to do their jobs. These are agents who, especially when it comes to Border Patrol, and I imagine the same thing applies to ICE, Customs, they live here, right? They're part of the community. They want the community here to be safe. It's not like they're just in for this position, in the positions that they have for a couple of years before they move on up the bureaucratic ladder. This is their home. And it must be very difficult. You probably hear a lot more of it from those agents because they live nearby.
Well, absolutely, and they're friends of mine that I've known for many years. And it's really sad, really, when they can't do what they want to do. They know how to do it. They just don't let them do it. Via policies or whatever manner or whatever way they want to throw it out there in conversation. And what is being done is not correct. And it's frustrating for them, it's frustrating for me, but more for them because this comes from the federal side versus the state side. And I've always worked alongside the federal government. I believe in what they do because we're all trained to do the right thing. And it's very difficult when you're not allowed to do the right thing.
Well, I hope that the people who are listening to this podcast understand what you're saying and that we can help put pressure on Washington, D.C. to urge the administration to do the right thing, to follow the law, and Congress to exert their checks and balances to do that. I really appreciate the fact that you let us come here today and just show and discuss the problems for the lack of law enforcement that you see and that affect the rest of the country.
It impacts the whole country. It really does.
And what you and your officers and the ranchers and the people who live in this community experience with the people who are dying here, that's not humane. What you are doing, the way that you're treating them, I think is the most humane thing that you can do, and you're treating them with dignity. But this is not humane. Our policies are not humane. They actually harm people.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for your time. We're going to do all we can to continue to educate the public about the situation and do everything that we can to try to get the rule of law to be enforced at the federal level.
Thank you for dropping by.
Thank you very much, Jenny Martinez.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to stop freedom thieves from turning our country into a communist nightmare, be sure to click the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, click the notifications bell to get an alert every time we post a new episode.